Victoria Smith. The brief was that I was asked to present proof of concept ideas to Chapter, which is a film festival. Producers will be selecting novels that they feel will make ideal feature films. They want to see either individual scenes or chapters of the novels made into short films as proof of concept. They will then select and fund the best to develop into full features. Each year the novels will change, and this year's theme is The Future Is Now. The novels selected are 1984, A Brave New World, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, The Orcs and Crake, and The Shape of Things to Come. I'm working as an assistant director in a small film production collective, and all of those within the collective are recent graduates, and we have identified Chapter Film Festival as a way of getting our work recognised by a larger audience. In response to the brief, I have researched the themes and in the suggested novels and the novels themselves. So 1984, I took inspiration from 1984 by having a depiction in my production of people's freedoms and rights taken away by a totalitarian government. And I have done this by including John losing his insanity over a lack of freedom. I also want the music to reflect John's psychological state, which is also included in the novel, as the music played in 1984 always reflects the state of the world. In Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, when researching this novel, I took inspiration from the theme of empathy on the author's metaphysical reflection on the meaning of life. Each character has to deal with empathy and how it allows them to be viewed as real. A main theme I took inspiration from is the blurred distinction between what is real and not real. I have shown this in my short film by having the main character John lose his insanity and begin to talk to his deceased wife Bonnie as if she was alive. He also kills Laura and her form transfers into Bonnie in his mind, so when he suffocates her at the end, he thinks that he's freeing his wife again, but this isn't the case. He's murdering Laura purely because she looks similar to his wife. So this shows that John doesn't know what's real and what's not reality. In Fahrenheit 45, I took inspiration from this novel by using the theme of tension between knowledge and ignorance. In Fahrenheit 45, Weber's search for knowledge destroys the unquestionable ignorance he used to share with the rest of the population. He now battles basic beliefs. I have used this in Purgatory by having John battle his own internal judgment of what being free is really like. He is the only character to battle his thoughts, but his interactions and conversations about freedom are different with each character. So this is the case with Laura when she's walking him home. They have a conversation about what her definition of freedom is, whilst they look at the birds just as symbolism of being free. This reflects that each person, what their definition of freedom is different. Nobody's the same. In A Brave New World, I took inspiration that progress doesn't always maximise happiness. John has a wife, a job and an average working life, yet he's still looking for fulfilment somewhere else, and ultimately this is the idea of being free and having that fulfilment. It drives him insane and it starts his descent to madness. So initial research I conducted on how to portray John killing his wife correctly is euchroicide, which is the husband kills his wife, and martyrdom, which is the wife kills husband. According to the FBI, 26 of all homicide cases where the perpetrator is known that the victim has been murdered by one of their family or a close relative. The University of Medicine in Albania's case studies determine martyrdom as an extreme form of family violence, as family violence is still a major issue of concern, and in evaluation of case studies, this report shows that environmental factors are key in promoting aggressive behaviour. So this is a phenotype. So if you grow up in a not nice environment, those characteristics and how you've been brought up will play a major role on how you see the world and how you act. So if your parents tell you to respect your elders, you will grow up with that idea to respect your elders, where if you've taught not to respect your elders, not to say thank you, then you're going to grow up with this idea of not saying thank you and not being polite. I also researched the psychological reasoning behind why someone would want to kidnap someone, as obviously John kills and kidnaps and kills Laura in my film. Kidnap is a growing epidemic with no realistic solution. Normally someone would kidnap someone to either have control over that person, to murder them, or it could be committed for a ransom or furtherance of a crime. People who want to kidnap someone will develop a, a profile of their target before making the abduction based on their overall goals, which fall into one of three categories: extremism, financial gain, and emotional disturbance. John falls in the emotional disturbance category as he targets Laura because she fits the profile of his wife, which makes him want to kidnap and murder her to set her free from the restraints of the world, which he did previously with Bonnie. The feeling of loss and lack of control in his life festered in John's irrational thoughts, making him act out due to his emotion. I also researched how a victim to abduction would act in that situation to add realism to Laura's scenes in the film. Making the commotion and drawing attention to yourself is key in order to attract people towards you who might help fight the attacker away. In Laura's case, John manipulates her in order to sympathise with him, so much she helps him walk home and actually walks into his house on her own accordance because he invites her in for a drink and the promise that he'll buy her a taxi so she can go safely on a journey as a way of saying thank you for helping him home. Once she's inside, John spikes her drink. So in this case, Laura didn't have the opportunity to fight John off because she was already under the influence of some sort of drug. He seduced her to come into his home, so all of everything, Laura couldn't make sense of the situation as everything acted out too fast for it to even sink in, and before it could sink in, she's going to be asleep because the drug's kicking in. As Laura can no longer fight or scream because her arms and legs are bound and restricted of any movement, she is only left with one defence: thinking rationally and strategically, not letting her mind be clouded with adrenaline. When the victim attempts to escape, their efforts are often fatal, and Laura knows better than this, so she is compliant and courteous to John, her abductor, because she knows that if she argues or fights back, this could aggravate John and put her in further danger. Totalitarianism causes danger when people want to follow a powerful leader. However, this is what forms a totalitarian government, and this is the case in the year 2081. Totalitarianism involves the government infringing human rights in order to monitor and surveillance the public 24/7. Everything is regulated and there are no individual freedoms. The lack of individual freedom is the main centre point of where John's insanity spiralled from, causing him to ponder on the question of what is freedom and how can he achieve it, which leads him onto the darker journey, which leads him to the death of himself, his wife and Laura. The result I would like for my film is to shock audiences whilst also protecting non-dominant features that are daily occurrences in our modern day world in the year 2081. The film forms as a guide to the audience, and the toll takes it out of some people having their life written for them. Some people are less fortunate and will take any job for the financial stability, and for that financial stability, that's why most people endure the repetition of most days in their lives. This drives John crazy because I want the audience to think the question that John lost his insanity over: are we truly free? I feel like the audiences can aspire a little bit to John and the repetition of daily working lives, because we don't always have the opportunity to choose the job we want, and we don't always have the opportunity to live the lifestyle we want, and most people have to work towards the lifestyle that they desire. And in order to do that, some people work one job, some people work two jobs, some people do a course and work, and that repetition of that daily rat race, it does drive some people crazy. The emotions I intend to provoke with this film are sadness, anger, and the blurred distinction between sanity and insanity. I want the audience to feel danger, feel the anger of his wife when she talks to John after being murdered. I want John's guilt and confusion and longing to be felt by the viewers because he is in search for fulfilment, and I feel that's something we can all relate to in our own personal way. I want to provoke a less positive emotion from the audience, because I believe this is the way society is. It's not really a positive place to be in. You go on the news and it's never something positive on the news. It's always murder, knife crime, gang-related violence. It's not a safe society. I believe the world and society is a horrible place to live in and be involved in. And I want the year 2081 to reflect the cynicism in a dystopian society. And my objectives and aims for the story is that I want my production to be linear, focusing on the life of John and his descent to madness as the totalitarian society slowly chips away his individuality until John mentally breaks. I think we all can relate to that because we all have our snapping point. I feel like the world and society chips away at people's innocence and confidence and personality until they're just an empty conformist shell. John doesn't give in to conforming, he fights even though this makes him insane. He'd rather rebel and set his wife free from this way of living. My aim is for John not to be seen as the villain, but to have the audience empathise with John. He is an outcast because he doesn't think the same as everyone else, but if everyone else thought the same as him, he would be considered normal. I have sent off a short synopsis of my production to the distribution company Seed and Spark. If my short gets put on the site, not only will it achieve global recognition from mass audiences, but I will also have the opportunity to have deep audience data, which is half the financial split and customised marketing. When submitting my application, they asked for my contact details and a short synopsis of my production. If this intrigues them, then I will get a reply in around 60 days with what I presume is further information. So just in the top corner, that's a screenshot of my computerised reply. As my production can be categorised under the genres of horror and sci-fi, I started exploring more niche sites to distribute my content on. It's a Short is a site that's categorised content under genres, so audiences can easily find the niche they want to view. Subscribers to the site pay monthly as the site pays the rental fee, and the money will be received by myself directly into my bank. It's a Short also offers online film festivals that I can enter my productions in just to see if I could win a cash prize, but also recognition from other industry workers. I can upload my work to this site free of charge, which is something I found most times you have to upload or pay a fee to upload your work to the site. I would also like to distribute my work to a site called filmfreeway.com, which is a trusted site by leading film festivals. The site has over 8,000 of the best film festivals and contests, and submitting my work to this site will provide me with the names of film festivals that are best suited for my film, and I will enter my work on behalf. So the site will enter my work, my productions, into competitions that they feel will best suit my work, and they will do that on behalf of me. And if I do get noticed, they'll send me a notification. They'll always keep me updated on where my work is, if it's been viewed, if it's not been viewed. So I think that's really nice. It adds a personal touch. I feel I will reach my audiences by also uploading my work to advertising on-demand platforms such as YouTube, as users are able to share my content on social networking sites such as Facebook. This allows audiences to interact with my video and share it to other audience members, their friends, their family, their co-workers, people they think that will like the video purely for entertainment purposes. I will use my website to release my production, and this will also allow users on my site to view my production. So it will also advertise my company, shot by both sides. I will also upload my own sneak peek and trailers on social networks. It works for audiences to see, and then I will embed a link to the distributing site that's showing my work. Just because if you watch a trailer, if the trailer's portrayed properly, it intrigues you to want to watch the film. So I feel like if I did this and did my own trailer, it would entice people to want to actually go onto that site or the platform that's distributing my content and engage with the production. I I'm looking forward to distributing my films to Film Freeway Units for short, as this could allow me huge networking opportunities, and it can also really establish my name and my company's name if I was ever to win anything. I would release my film with the format of MP4 because it's the most universal video format and they can maintain high video quality. However, as I'm editing with a MacBook, I might use the MOV format purely because it was specifically designed for QuickTime Player. And since there's a version of this for Windows, it can also be used on all devices, but it will just take up more memory when viewed on a non-Apple product. But this is purely because of the footage and the quality of the footage being very high. Online videos exist in multiple formats such as MPEG-4, AVC, AVC-HD. However, I will be selecting the format MP4 for my content. Another reason I'm selecting this is because it's compatible with streaming services. Some of the technical considerations needed to make my film is what cameras I'm going to record on. I plan to use a mix between the Canon 1200D DSLR. These are small shoot and point devices and they are easy and light to use. The biggest strength of this device is that it's affordable and compact, so it's really easy to manoeuvre on all these different locations that I have to record on. It'll also record in HD quality. And the weakness of this camera is that the internal microphones have limited quality and often you need an external audio device. I use a shotgun, you could use a Zoom mic. I just like the shotgun, I feel like it's more compatible when you put it in the camera and you can just angle it. It's just easy to manoeuvre when you go into all these different locations. So obviously I'll need to consider this, and I'll also need to use a muffler or a microphone cover just to stop the wind disturbance. I will also be using a JVC recorder, which come with more control over the shot as they have full HD capability, wide angle lenses and other features, and more manual, adaptable, so you can really personalise it to how you want to use it. It's just some of the automatic features aren't as good. A weakness of using this would be the initial price, as it costs to use the equipment and the skill needed to effectively use this camera. So if you want to use that manual and to really personalise it to the best footage, you'd have to know the ins and outs of that devices and what buttons and what settings to look under and where everything is. You'd have to be really familiar with the camera, and you'd have to possess knowledge and skills about shooting with the camera. I plan to conduct a screening by asking participants of various ages and professions to view my film, and after I'll get participants to answer a questionnaire that I created on Google Forms to gain knowledge on their thoughts and opinions about the production. I will also record participants talking about their opinions of the film together in the screening. I would like to rent out the studio at City College Coventry in order to set it up as an empty space, and it will be a place for my audience to sit and view the film. The extra space will allow me to set up cameras to record the screening and the feedback the participants give. A technical concern of mine would be the recording of the feedback from the screening at the studio in City College. To avoid error, I'll use multiple cameras at different shots and frames to record the whole of the screening. I'll also use the camera's internal recorder as a backup, but I'll also use that shotgun mic just to get some crisp quality audio. And then I can also use a 360 mic just to ensure as a backup that I have high quality audio. My target audience. So I sent a questionnaire out to audiences to have a rough idea about what demographic will like my film. The first question concerned age, so I could get a rough idea about the ages of my potential demographic. So as we can see, nobody was under 16. 12.5% was between 17 and 20. 12.5% was 59 and over. 25% was 40 to 49. 25% was ages 30 to 39, and another 25% was ages 21 to 29. So here we can see young to middle aged adults. That's the demographic, that's my target demographic. We can see that it does also appeal to older and younger ages, but it's mainly ages 21 to 49. Them 3/4 make up a third of my audience. From this, I asked what their favourite genre was, so I could get an idea of who my film appealed to. So as I asked, what's your favourite genre? 12.5 liked drama, 12.5 liked action, 25% liked horror, 37.5% liked comedy, and 12.5% liked documentaries. So here we can see that 25% of that audience Purgatory would appeal to it, just purely because they like the genre horror. And Purgatory, I think I would categorise it under horror, psychological horror, thriller, but also sci-fi, purely because it's set in the dystopian future of 2081. I knew that an adaptation to the novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was made, which resulted in the success of the film Blade Runner. I wanted to know out of curiosity if people enjoyed this film, just so I could get an understanding if there's anything particular that the audiences had that maybe my film could have in common. My feedback was mainly positive towards the film, that shows his audience like to engage with dystopian films. So as you can see, it was classic, love the story. Is Harrison Ford a replicant? It is heavily implied that he is a replicant, but I won't go off on that tangent. So some people couldn't get into it. Most people says the replicants are cool. Yes, I enjoyed it. Loved the character development. Good film. Also, to elaborate on target audience, I asked audience about their outlooks of the future. So here we see that audiences equally see the future positively and negatively. I thought this was interesting because I found a pattern in audiences that they show if they have a negative view on life, they will enjoy the dystopian films over utopian films, and if they have a positive view on life, they'll enjoy the utopian films more. So my demographic will have to have a negative outlook on the future society to really engage with the cynicism in the dystopian future, whereas if you had a nice positive outlook, you're not going to think the future is going to be distraught. You're going to think the future is sunshine and rainbows, so this won't appeal to you. Would you be interested in watching a film about a man's psychological descent to madness because of a totalitarian society? So 75% said yes, whether they're being kind or not. And then 25% said maybe. So here we can see nobody would not want to watch it. Most people would like to watch it, and some people, it depends if they see the trailer or not. That's where the advertising comes in with the trailers. To further allow John to have a more realistic reaction to being controlled and monitored 24/7, I asked the public how they would feel under those circumstances, and all feedback was negative because cameras monitor us all the time already. Technology has proved to be an advantage and disadvantage to society simultaneously. Suppression, we would be slaves, go crazy, scared, can be blackmailed, controlled completely, could be paranoid. So nothing's positive. So we can see that under this extreme surveillance, it wouldn't make people feel more safe, and it wouldn't deter crime. It would just make people more paranoid and more angry, and it comes in on that infringing human rights. Lastly, I asked audiences what they think the future will look like, just to see if they were mostly cynical or if they had a positive attitude, which ultimately dictates how they're going to like the production. And my findings were audiences had a mostly negative outlook to the future, which means they'll like my production because you need to have that cynicism in order to relate to the production. You need to have that that negative outlook on the world. So most people says technological advancements, Hunger Games, but no one wins. Technology will be the destruction of humanity. Lots of advancements, explore and live on other planets. So obviously, I'd say some people, I'd sway that as positive because they're on about colonising on other planets, but it's how you twist that. Would that be good? Would that be negative? So we've already destroyed Earth. Would we want to go and destroy another planet? Humans are proven to be self-destructive. Secondary research I conducted into my audience was the demographics and the ratings for films that fall into sci-fi or the horror genre. Star Trek is a prime example of a movie that has the stigma of a mainly male audience. However, ratings show that it has a larger female audience, which determines that sci-fi can appeal to all genders. I found the Hunger Games, even though the main character was female, a majority of the readers of the Hunger Games novels were female and the majority of the audience were male, so maybe this could come into the male and female gaze. They come to see, I forgot the cat, is it Katniss? They come to see whoever plays Jennifer Lawrence, I think it's her name. They've come to see her, they've come to see the male gaze. Overall, the genre sci-fi and films labelled into this genre mainly appeal to a male audience aged around 17 to 29, so they're young adults, and for this reason I should be considering them as a vast part of my target audience because it has a male leading character and it is a sci-fi film. I also researched into demographics of the horror genre and found that these films attract a young adult audience as well, mainly under 25. It also states that roughly 42% of audiences are female, with a 58% still being male. All horror films appeal to younger audiences. They seek thrill and they want this thrill-seeking catharsis that horror can provide. They want them cheap thrills. They want them jump scares. Audiences tend to want this. Overall, older audiences who won't be as active, they'd probably be more passive during the film just because they don't want that thrill, they don't want that jump scare. They've been there, they've done that, they'd rather be at home. So I think an older audience would be more passive and a younger audience would be more engaging and more active within the production of Purgatory. So on this, I base my research on my target audience is going to be mainly male young adults aged between 17 and 30, and according to the statistics of YouGov, psychological horror is mostly popular with males, but has a mostly positive opinion amongst millennials and baby boomers because they are seeking the thrill of scare. But I also feel like this is because males aren't put off by the graphic images that are actually drawn towards them. The Saw franchise is a really good example of this because it's known for its graphic violence and images, and it's also got a mainly male audience. As my film contains horror and the genre is stereotypically aimed at males, I will follow this as males enjoy watching more violence and more graphic images than females. However, mainly young females enjoy horror films like myself, even though they're commonly aimed at a male gender. I love the Saw franchise, and I feel like people would watch my film in the comforts of their home rather than going to the cinema because and this is why I would like to release my production on service on demand platforms such as sending them off to these film festivals and sites. Purely because I feel like theatres, why go when you can watch something free or for a quarter of the price, and you wouldn't be with strangers that might talk through the film. You can enjoy it in the comforts of your own home, doing what you want, dressed as what you want, with blankets. Most people don't go to the theatres anymore. And I would aim my film at the middle social class and the unemployed, as I feel these were the people that are looking for a thrill and an escape from the routine of their daily life. So I think middle class. So middle class would be B, teachers, C1's nurses, C2 skilled workers, D is manual workers, and E is students like myself. But these social groupings, they're not determined. So a student, I'd rank at the bottom, but then as soon as I get a job, and depending on what that job could be, my rank would then higher. So if I become a teacher, I'd become a B class. But then if I became a manual worker, I'd still be in a D class. So these are very temporary. And then you could say a teacher changes his career, and then it becomes, I don't know, let's say a manual worker will then go to a D class. So it's very temperamental and it's dependent on the person and how they work. The film might appeal to the middle class because they can get a thrill at a low cost, but the upper class may be less likely to indulge in horrors. They can acquire thrills in other ways. So for the working class, it just may be a cheaper way of escaping the everyday cycle of their lives. Horror films mainly appeal to mainstreamers as they want to follow the trend with what's popular. Horror also appeals to explorers as they want to be different from the crowd. So if comedy is popular, they'll go and see a horror to be different, or if a horror's on, they'll go to see a comedy to be different. So my concept proposed, so my idea is that the film's set in the dystopian future of 2081, and the film follows the main character John, who gets fired from his job and begins to question his freedom, and the psychological descent to madness causes him to not only kill his wife but also kidnap Laura in an attempt to set her free from the constraints of the world. I reached this idea by applying themes and ideas from the selected novels given in the brief. I wanted the theme of ignorance versus knowledge to be prominent in these films as it follows John's psychological escapade. So some of the themes that I've used in Purgatory would be trust. So Bonnie trusts her husband John, which led to her own demise. John trusted work and the government, but they fired him because he was easily replaceable. Laura trusted John just to be escorted home, and she wanted to help him, but obviously that led her to her own demise. Guilt. Guilt is shown by John feeling this because he murdered his wife, and it also leads him to also kidnap Laura and kill her and commit suicide himself. Death is personified as John's wife, which guides him to his own demise. It also commits suicide at the end of the film, as well as murdering Laura. A mental disorder is shown through the rhythm of the shots and techniques used. So the camera shots quicken in pace and variety, which reflects John's mental state and as I've previously mentioned, the music and the audio used is going to reflect some of his mental state, so I don't know if it's going to be contrapuntal or just to represent the state that he's in. Conflict between freedom and censorship. A totalitarian government infringes human rights and censors and monitors everything, so there's no privacy when it comes to what the government monitors. Humans are provided with work roles and aren't allowed to explore their own skills and destiny. It's all handed to them and they have to accept it and build their life around that fact. And this is what sends John onto his psychological descent. Dichotomy is shown because was it right for... In John's mind, he thinks it's right to kill his wife to set her free from the constraints of the world, but murder is always frowned upon no matter how it's justified. So that blurred distinction in John's mind between what's good and bad, he doesn't know. And each character has a different perspective on what freedom means to them. So this is how the theme of freedom is explored in Purgatory. John believes freedom is an escape from the totalitarian government and the constraint and the constant monitoring infringing human rights. And John also kills his wife and Laura for them to be free from the constraints in the world. So some of the characters, so John Rhodes is the main character. He's an average married man who works for a powerful corporation before they replaced him with someone smarter and faster, because everybody's easily replaceable in society. This triggered John to begin to question what freedom is and why is the government monitoring everything, and this passion of truly being free became John's obsession and led him to kill his wife and Laura in order to provide her with a better life than this and to set her free of the constraints, the constant monitoring of the government. So when he kills his wife, he achieves some sort of catharsis before the guilt overpowers his mind, alongside the paranoia of constantly being monitored. His sanity continues to deteriorate as he lies in the bed next to the corpse of his wife. Paranoia and guilt empower John's mind as he begins to start to see the body of his dead wife talking to him. He believes he's doing the righteous thing when he kidnaps Laura, to not only replace the role of his deceased wife, but to also help her on her journey to true freedom. And when he kills himself, he believes he is doing the right thing for himself, to be free from this world and the guilt and the government monitoring him. Bonnie Rhodes is John's wife. She shares her life with him. She adores him. When he tells her that she has been fired from his job, she doesn't mind, because she doesn't matter if he is rich or poor. She cherishes him, her life with John. And Bonnie has high respect for the government and follows anything told to her submissively by higher authoritarian personalities. She loves and cherishes John, even if that led her to her own demise. And then when Bonnie dies, John envisions her dead corpse talking to him. So this is the bad side of John's subconscious, which questions and applauds his murders and taunts and mocks his wrongdoings. She encourages John to revolt from the everyday life and show people what being cut free of all constraints is really like. She taunts and terrorises John into his descent of despair until she tells John to truly be free, which essentially allows him to release himself from the clutches of his madness, to be free in his insanity and with his wife. Laura is age 19 and she's just a normal teenage girl walking through the woods as a shortcut home. So this left her vulnerable to John as darkness masked her, allowing to be taken. Laura is a carefree person who's gullible to the world and society she doesn't think that bad things happen purely because the government infringes human rights and everyone's constantly being monitored, surveillance, controlled. So in her mind, no wrongdoings can be permitted or allowed. So in her last moments alive, her being scared and questioning what she has done to deserve this. I already know on my own knowledge that sci-fi is different from fantasy because it relies on science and facts and theories to support its setting and characters and story structure. I believe horror is another genre that is included in my film, but that is because of the depictions of violence. I believe the film has maintained the original brief because it is a more graphic adaptation of the novels, which heavily rely on the novel's themes. The film also is set in the future, which is 2081 dystopian, and it's controlled by a totalitarian government. I feel James Cameron inspired me with his films portraying a story of science fiction such as Avatar. I feel how humans are always on their own downfall and always constructing their own fate. James Wan and Guillermo del Toro, I'm so sorry, have inspired me because they are cinematographers who capture some of the most iconic scenes in this horror genre. James Wan structures his work to reflect the pace of the characters, but he will also stretch the pace of his shots to elongate suspense when needed. He also uses lots of symbolism in his cinematography, which I think adds deeper meanings to his scenes. I will rent equipment such as the JVC camera and DSLRs, cameras and tripods to manipulate light. I will rent out a spotlight and camera lights to attach to the cameras, just to lighten up shots if they're too dark or if it's just needed. If I'm shooting a scene late at night or in the afternoon, just because it's still in that time of day where it gets dark about 4 or 5 o'clock, it will always come in handy. I will incorporate Foley and non-diegetic sound, where I will use non-copyrighted audio, probably from freesound.com, or YouTube's audio library, which is available to use. So I'll use the public domain copyright just purely because you're allowed to manipulate and use the music without even crediting the original artist. I want to produce the film with a claustrophobic feel to it, so there will be a lack of establishing shots included, so the audience don't really know where they are, and it's just used to exaggerate that sensation of being lost. When judging the age rating of my film, I looked to the BBFC to see their guidelines. I wanted my film to be an 18 because it includes dangerous behaviour and violence, and it also dwells on detail. Although there's no sex, nudity, drug taking, or any sexual violence, my film does contain strong language. I think it's the government official when he comes and speaks to John. He's quite rude, aggressive, and he does have foul language. In my film, there is a sustained focus on John murdering his wife. In addition to this, there's a depiction of violence in my production as John kidnaps and kills Laura as well as his wife. Violence is strong and dwells on the infliction of pain. I intend to influence the audience in my production by having the structure of the rhythm and the shots reflect John's mental state. When the pace quickens, the audience know that something is going to happen. I will also change the way the audience perceives John by shooting the character from different angles. So if John's weak, I'll shoot him from a low angle shot. If he's showing dominance, I will shoot him from a high angled shot. It's commonly used, I think I used it, no, I've seen it used Silence of the Lambs when the policewoman goes to talk to Hannibal Lecter. That's used when they have that conversation. I think that's quite effective. I have considered my target audience research if I included gore and violence, as most of my audience are young male adults who won't be deterred by violence. I would like to include some jump scares in for the audience, as most of them will be looking for a thrill. And similarly, I can't say, I'm so sorry. And similarly, both genres, so horror and sci-fi, their audiences are predominantly young working class males. When distributing my film, I will use online platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, and I'll also send them into the film festival the film festivals and sites that I previously mentioned, just because young adults have a heavy online presence and we're in the digital age. We are the digital generation. We are always sharing things on Facebook or Twitter or all the other social medias out there. We use the internet a lot, even if it is watching our entertainment. So I feel like this is a good way to reach my audiences. I've chosen to present my film in a linear order to show the passage of time whilst focusing on John's mental deterioration. I will use my shot list breakdown to really help incorporate how I'm going to capture the character's emotions on the film. I will also use the absence of sound in parts to amplify the loneliness John feels, but to also build suspense. I'll edit and pace the rhythm of John's mental state. So when John gets angry, the rhythm of the shots will quicken, whereas the shots will be a lot slower and longer if he was calm and relaxed. I feel the edit for my genre will have a mix of editing, pacing, just to purely build suspense. So in the totalitarian society of 2081, the film follows John, an ordinary person enslaved by the government. One day he's fired from his job and begins to realise he is not free. John's quest to be free from the constraints of the world seduces his psychological descent to madness. The love John has for his wife causes him to murder her and set her free from the world. But even after her death, the guilt haunts John. John kidnaps an innocent woman called Laura to set her free as one last deed before he kills himself. The film is a sci-fi horror and it is set in the dystopian future of 2081 and also includes the graphic violence of John killing his wife. The intended audience for this production is young male class workers, working adults, as they don't cower away from the graphic depictions of gore and violence. And I also want them to have a thrill-seeking catharsis, which a sci-fi/horror genre can bring. I have based my film on the novels that will fit with the theme. The future is now, and the blurred distinction between knowledge and ignorance and freedom and censorship. And the theme of freedom is shown throughout the film by having John's conversations with characters always relate back to this theme of freedom and how it's different for each individual and how we all long for something more. What is true freedom? And the blurred distinction between ignorance and knowledge is shown because the ignorant civilians of 2081 do not question the government and the censorship of human rights, and the rise of knife crime in the UK. That's why the totalitarian governments enforce these rules and infringing human rights, so they don't really have the opportunity to question it. But surely if a government threw all this infringement onto you, you would revolt. But this question, it just drives John insane. So the treatment, as I've previously mentioned, this is just a more elongated version of that synopsis. Yeah, so I'll just flick through that. I wouldn't want to just reiterate because we've already. So John Rhodes is the main character. He's an average man who lost his job for working for a powerful corporation, and this made John begin to question: does freedom exist in the totalitarian society of 2081? And this passion of truly being free became John's obsession and led him to kill his wife and Laura. So in order to provide her with a better life than this and to free her from the constant monitoring of the government, he kills her, and he achieves some sort of catharsis before the guilt overpowers him and the paranoia. And then from this, his sanity continues to deteriorate. So in the end, John kills himself, and believes he's doing this for the right thing after killing Laura, and he's doing this to free himself from the guilt and the monitoring from the government. So Bonnie Rhodes, as we know, that's John's wife, and she loves him even though it led her to her own demise. And Laura Dunn, she is a normal teenage girl walking through the woods to get home, which left her vulnerable to John. Now, the master scenes that I've used for my script, so this is page 1 of my script. As you can see, I've used I forgot the font, Calibra 12. I've used the proper script master scene format. I've put the names of characters in bold and underlined. I put slug lines. I've put the camera shots onto the left side. So I think the formatting of my script is pretty precise. So some of the resources I'll be using. So in the studio, when I film the exposition of the news report, I'll be using 2 JVC cameras, 2 spotlights, just to add some manipulation to the light if need be. So 2 tripods purely for stability if I don't want to just handheld. If I don't just want handheld footage, and as it's a news report, it needs to be stable and professional because it's supposed to mimic a news report, and obviously the zoom might just enhance quality in audio. So when I'm at home here, I'll be using my own DSLR Canon 1200D, but I might use a JVC that I'll rent from City College purely because of the footage difference, and if I want to have more manual control over the camera and the shot that I'm getting, just more than what a DSLR can give me. Shotgun mics, spotlights and tripods just in order to manipulate the light. So when I was down the Slough, this is outside. Because it's outside, I'll be using the DSLR or JVC again. It depends. I could use both in all honesty, and then I'll be using that shotgun, but I will need the windscreen just to protect the wind from going in that mic, purely because that wind interference will be the death of the production, and that will I'll have to go back out if I don't protect and stop that wind interference to record all the sound again. I don't want to do that. So when I was in town, there might be some wind interference. It depends on the weather, but I'll just take a windscreen just in case. But I'll be using my own DSLR just purely because it's a bit more portable in town. It's a bit more smaller and compact, and I'll be using the shotgun mic just to enhance the audio quality, just because I'm in a public place. And then when I'm at John's work, I'll be using the 2 JVC cameras just to pick up multiple shots at different angles, spotlights, tripods, just for stability because I don't want that handheld feel to it, and shotgun mics. So I had to contact Philip at City College to ask for permission to use the studio for an allotted time, which he granted, so I'll be using it on Wednesday the 12th to record the exposition. As I was recording at Wycombe Slough, and the city centre, I contacted Coventry City Council, who kindly allowed me to record down there without applying for any permissions, as I'm a small crew recording an actor without any people from the public being involved. The licensing department in the City Council permitted me to do this under the condition that I do not block any pathways for the public or I do not record on any roads with any traffic. So I agreed to this. There you'll see the picture of the initial phone call purely because there was no documentation for me to fill in because I was such a small crew. There was nothing available for me to print off from the site or nothing. So I had to call and just elaborate on what I was doing just to get verbal permission and just to log it. So my unique selling point, I will use a mixture of pleonastic and contrapuntal sound to add juxtaposition in my conscious choices as a director. And as a director, I want to have the shots and pacing dependent on the mental state of John, as I will find this to engage an active audience into intriguing them into the shots and how the shots can detail and portray a lot of emotion, and it can tell the audience a lot about the character and the character development in Purgatory. What makes my film unique is that it follows the mental deterioration of the character John, but by doing this, it also allows the audience to create a relationship with John. So in the end, the audience ends up empathising with John, even though he's a murderer, he killed his wife, he killed Laura. We feel sorry for him. So this is just my bibliography. And yeah, that's everything. Thank you for listening.